When people hear Harlem Renaissance, they usually think about jazz music, poetry, dancing, maybe a few famous black writers and artists. And yes, all of that is true, but the Harlem Renaissance was way deeper than people make it seem. This wasn't just black people making art for entertainment. This was black Americans trying to reclaim their identity in a country that spent hundreds of years trying to destroy it. A lot of people don't realize that. And honestly, schools don't really explain how important this period was. They mention a few names, maybe show a poem, then move on. But the Harlem Renaissance helped shape modern black culture as we know it today. Music, fashion, politics, literature, activism, all of it traces back to this era in some way. So, before we get into the bigger names and events, we need to understand why this movement happened in the first place. The Harlem Renaissance mainly took place during the 1920s into the 1930s in Harlem, New York. But, like most major black movements in history, it didn't appear out of nowhere. It was a response. Black Americans were still dealing with segregation, racial violence, discrimination, and the effects of slavery. On top of that, black people were constantly mocked and stereotyped in American entertainment through minstrel shows and racist depictions. So, imagine constantly seeing your people portrayed as ignorant, dangerous, lazy, or less intelligent. Eventually, people got tired of that. The Harlem Renaissance became a way for black Americans to take control of their own image and tell their own stories. Now, the reason Harlem specifically became the center of all of this was because of something called the Great Migration. Between 1910 and 1930, millions of black Americans began leaving the South trying to escape lynching, Jim Crow laws, and poverty. A lot of them moved north looking for better opportunities and safer living conditions. Harlem became one of those places where black communities started growing rapidly. And when you place that many black thinkers, writers, musicians, activists, and intellectuals in one area, something powerful is bound to happen. Ideas spread quickly, people influenced each other, and suddenly, Harlem became the center of a cultural revolution. Now, this is where things get deeper than what most people talk about. The Harlem Renaissance was not just random art being created, a lot of this was intentional. Writers like Langston Hughes wanted to write about real black life, not just upper-class, respectable black people, but working-class black Americans too. He wrote about struggle, joy, music, family, daily life, and one thing I respect about him is that he believed black people did not need to water themselves down to deserve respect. That mattered at the time because there was pressure for black artists to act a certain way in front of white audiences. Zora Neale Hurston, who is one of my favorite authors by the way, also played a major role. She traveled through the South documenting black folklore, dialects, and traditions that mainstream America ignored completely. And honestly, if people like her didn't preserve these stories, a lot of cultural history probably would have been lost. The movement also had major intellectual leaders. W.E.B. Du Bois believed black art should uplift the race and show the intelligence and dignity of black Americans. Then you have Alain Locke, who pushed the idea of the new Negro. Basically, the idea was that black Americans should no longer accept the submissive image forced onto them after slavery. The new Negro was supposed to be educated, politically aware, confident, and unapologetically black. Again, this is why we keep saying this movement was bigger than music and poetry. This was about identity. Of course, music was still a massive part of the movement. Jazz exploded during this time. Artists like Duke Ellington completely changed American music forever. But even here, there were contradictions. A lot of famous black performers played in segregated clubs like the Cotton Club, where black entertainers performed for white audiences only. That tells you everything you need to know about America during that period. Black culture was loved. Black people were not. That contradiction follows black history constantly throughout America in general. Visual artists also contributed heavily to the movement. Aaron Douglas used African imagery and symbolism in his artwork, which helped reconnect black Americans to African heritage that slavery intentionally tried to erase. And this part is important because during slavery and colonization, African culture was often treated like something primitive or shameful. So, reconnecting to Africa was powerful psychologically and culturally. Now, something a lot of people leave out is that there were disagreements within the Harlem Renaissance itself. Not everybody agreed on what Black art should look like. Some people believe Black artists should represent the best image possible to fight racist stereotypes. Others believed Black art should be completely honest, even if it showed poverty, struggle, anger, or uncomfortable realities. I also agree with the latter half. It needs to be completely honest. That debate honestly never went away. You still see versions of the exact same argument today online whenever people debate how Black people should be represented in the media. Another uncomfortable truth is that white interests helped fund parts of the Harlem Renaissance. White publishers, club owners, and wealthy investors gave many Black artists opportunities they otherwise would not have access to. But obviously, that also came with limitations and control. Some artists had to change aspects of their work to appeal to white audiences. While the movement was empowering, it still existed inside a system controlled largely by white America. Despite all of that though, the Harlem Renaissance changed Black history forever. It helped create a new image of Black identity in America. It laid the groundwork for future movements like the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Arts Movement. And honestly, modern Black culture still carries its fingerprints. You can see it in hip hop, film, fashion, literature, political activism, even social media conversations around Black identity. By the 1930s, the Great Depression slowed a lot of the momentum down financially, but the impact never disappeared. The Harlem Renaissance proved that Black culture is not just influential, it's foundational to American culture itself. And I think that's what makes this era so important. These artists, writers, and intellectuals were fighting to define themselves in a country that constantly tried to define them first. And in many ways, we're still having those same battles today. In closing, I want to say that I do believe that Black art should not be polished. We are three-dimensional creatures, like everybody else, who goes through good times, bad times. And if we constantly try to polish ourselves up and look good for white America or any other ethnicity, it just is inauthentic. In my opinion, it just shows that there's still some sort of power and control over us. And we have the right to exist in the many different facets that we exist as everyone else does, without being judged, without trying to act like we're okay when we're not. Everybody else gets to express themselves openly and freely, but when it comes to us, there are still people within our community that think that we should ignore that because of, how we're depicted. Who cares how they depict us? What matters is how we see us and how we depict us. I'm not one of those people that think we need to polish everything up. I don't care about other people's opinions that much. And also, if we continue to polish everything, it can lead to us not realizing the issues and not looking at the issues because we're always dressing it up. It's that what happens in this house stays in this house type of mentality that I just don't like. And if we're honest about what we're going through, we can actually do something about it. We can actually address it head on, but we got to do it together, and we got to not act like we're not going through anything. And I hope that nobody that's listening to this thinks that they have to polish themselves up and dress themselves up to look like something they're not, to impress people who don't like us anyway. And even if they do and are impressed by you, they will never say it because of whatever else they got going on inside of them. So keep yourself authentic, and it will lead to happiness eventually, but you can't give up. Let me know what you all think in the comments, because understanding history is important, especially when so many people try to simplify it or erase parts of it. Like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on post notifications, and I'll see you all in the next video.